I'm Thommy Davis, and you're going to find out all interesting things about me here on Audio Infusion Green Room Sessions. Check it out. Stay tuned. Come stay with us. So, who is Thommy Davis? You know, it's going to be hard to say it all at once, but I guess he's a DJ, he's a producer, he's a label executive, and more times in my life than a little bit. I'm an author, I'm a motivational speaker now, I'm a stupid clown. You know, y'all need to stick to figure out what I'm going to say, because I don't even know. I ain't read the script, but you're going to check that out. So I guess Thommy Davis is a little bit of everything all together. There's no way I can tell you it all. I might tell y'all some secrets. Stay tuned. So some of my influences when I was younger, there was, and that's a long time ago. So that was during a period when there wasn't really a club or anything like that. My influence was a lot of what my parents was listening to. Most of us don't realize how influential that is, that when the music that you hear when you're young, from the time I was small. So my parents like to listen to a lot of the Della Sisters and some of classical things like Dionne Warwick and the original things. So I understood composition from a really original point of view. So they kind of influenced me, and they still to this day. I'm trying to do some of them things that I heard when I was younger. So let's say if one person was influential, I say it was Quincy Jones. It's just, I could hear just the simplicity of what he was doing. He was doing all kinds of music. When I was very, very young, I wasn't a jazz person. For me, numbers and sequence and rhythm had to be fundamental, and jazz is such a complex art, and I just couldn't grasp it until I got much, much older. So when I was younger, earlier, it was what they were listening to, and then this disco era came out. I mean, it was incredible to hear music that had a 4/4 sound to it, that was easy for me to digest, and it made me want to dance. I mean, I hung Christmas lights in my room. I imitated the sound. I was too young to get in Odell's when it first opened. This is like 76, 75 when I couldn't get in, but I knew enough to make this sound that everybody was talking about, which was disco. And that really influenced me. Before that, I was a funk person, soul, brass construction, a lot of the really funky, the original Cameo, you know, some of the stuff really led by the bass guitars, everything with a bass guitar on it. I still to this day, if you listen to stuff I work on, it's still led by the bass. The bass is just merges with a syncopated drum pattern. And drums and bass, I'm happy. I mean, I learned how to actually do things along the way. But originally, it was all about the drum, it was all about the bass, and it was all about disco. You know what? It still is right now. So when did I start DJing? Now, I think I've shared this on social networks, but I need to share this again so you understand. I think I was about 5. If you remember the close and play turntables, I mean, the little thing you open and close, and it had a record. Well, it was this record called Hippity Hop, and it had a song, it was real like a 1920 song, but it had the most interesting intro. And I used to take it. This is for you vinyl people. This is what I used to do as a DJ. Is to take the needle, and for you people to not know, the record turns around. You pick the needle up and you throw it real quick. And the more accurate you did that, you was doing what's like an edit. And I just kept doing it and doing my parents, just God bless them, because they had to hear that song over and over. Hippity hoppity, hippity hoppity, hippity hoppity, hippity hoppity. This is at 5. So needless to say, I wore that record out fast, but I had to move to the other ones. So it was during a period when mom and pop stores were popular. So my lunch money went to 45s. You know, some of my greatest treasures are still on 45s. Unfortunately, they got scratch marks all over it. So that was my first time as a DJ. And when I became a teen, the idea, it was Wayne Davis, watching him in a club. And before that, we used to go to clubs and stuff, and there was no continued music. It was record come on, record come off. The more clever you was about doing record come on and record come off and programming is what made the party. Well, Wayne was the first time I ever saw somebody actually, and you could stand in an original Dells and look at what he was doing. And he had this thing called a mixer. Never seen nothing like this before. And he would, with skill, put the beats together. So I went home and I went to Radio Shack. And one day they had this thing called a mixer. It had no cue, it had nothing, but you could transition from one record to the other. I was Wayne Davis. I was in the club. So you learn how to practice those records because it didn't have the turntables. I think my original turntable was a B1 Techniques or something. So you had to learn ways to slow the record down with the side of your finger on it or in the center spindle, and you had to learn beats per minute. So I went and got that little mixer from Radio Shack. I must have spent hours with my Christmas lights, those same records over and over again, and for hours and hours until the household couldn't take it, you know, because I had to make it sound like Odell's too. So back then I would plug all speakers in the house. All discarded speakers was part of my club. So until the police started knocking, which happened because the more and more I tried to sound like Odell's had this earth-shattering sound. It was nothing like it. I mean, the bricks would have dust. You would leave out and dust be on you from the bricks because they would shake it off of it. And I tried to do that. And you could kind of get close to it when you're in close quarters, but never duplicate it. So that, when I started doing that, and I was going to the record stores trying to find the records that I heard in the clubs that I saw in other clubs. There was Reflection, there was Odell's, there was Giovanni's, Pascal's, and 32nd Street, and a whole bunch, the Circus, and these clubs of all colors and all genres. Just music wasn't divided, so you could all go to one thing. And I got better and better at finding those records. So I guess that's when I became officially a DJ. But really, I was 4 or 5. So, you know, one of the original things that made me start thinking that I could do this music was the pause button on the cassette deck. Oh man, I must have killed more Maxells in 90 minutes doing that thing. Broke a couple of cassette decks. A cassette deck, for you young ones out there, it's a piece of tape that's in a thing. You drop it in and you could play, stop, rewind. Well, doing it, if you had another cassette deck, you could pause, edit, you could keep on punching it, trying to catch it, to hit rewind just enough to do it. It's really a hard skill. If you're a student, that's how it is. So one of my famous things that I really started out was in a cassette. And those cassettes I would play over and over again. Just pause button, pause button, pause button, pause button, pause button. Just to do what now I do with digital. So wait a minute. So how did I become a basement boy? Well, to understand that you have to realize that me and Spin and I have begun doing this thing with the record called Them Niggas, which spiraled internationally and turned into some other things. And I did, like I mentioned, or may not have mentioned, started doing other labels, because in Baltimore the idea of a Baltimorean doing their own records was like unheard of, at least from the urban side. So that started, and when that started, Jay Stein and I made this group up to further the idea called Changes. We never did anything because we included Ted, and it was just a perfect threesome. We was working in his basement. So you wonder, like, where is the name? We had to come up with a name. We had to have a one record on Jump Street called Love Don't Live Here Anymore, and Ted was singing the vocals, because me and Ted, for years have been like this. So we needed somebody to sing, he sang. And so we had to come up with a name for that. And so we said, well, we're in the basement, and we tossed it up, and Basement Boys is what we came up with. So for the record, Basement Boys is a production company that's huge with a lot of people. And by no means did it ever mean the three. But the three that started, me, Teddy Douglas, and Jay Steinhauer, was the original ones. And from that point on, it just blew up, and actually it's still going to this day in one form or another. It depends what you want to call it. So I didn't become a Basement Boy. We were Basement Boys. So how did Crystal Waters changed my career? You gotta remember that before that we had done other records. We never really thought of it as a plan. We just thought about it. We wanted to do this sound, and both Ted and I were working in record stores. So we were on the cusp of this sound. So the idea that people could make their own records, Jay was like, okay, we can do it. So when Crystal Waters blew up, just spiraled out as a demo, we were shocked. We didn't see it coming. It was, to us, equal to any other records, and any other records after that. It's just something that we do, that we did. So it changed immediately. Excuse me. I'm getting over a cold. It's not help being in this pajama party with pajamas on. But immediately it changed, and I want other new people to do it. If people are telling you, imagine people are telling me that you're wasting your time, you should be in school, you should be doing this, you should be working at the post office. I believe that I was doing the right thing. When Crystal Waters blew up and everybody in the world could relate to this sound, all of a sudden we were validated. And that is an important thing when you are out there doing your own thing. You just feel like everybody thinks I'm wasting my time. Everybody thinks I'm some kind of enigma. And when that happened, it changed. All of a sudden, we were valid. All of a sudden, I wasn't just this crazy boy doing this strange sound, and the world was saying, hey, that's gay people music. And we was like, what is gay people music? And music has never had a sexuality, never had a face, it never had a color. And it just validated us in a big way, that where we was on a major label and lived in Baltimore. So the world actually embraced us. It's like, y'all Basement Boys are a real thing. Our hometown never embraced us. Never embraced us until that happened. After that, then our hometown says, yes, you know what, I see what y'all doing, and y'all okay. And we're like, well, we don't care, we're gonna do it anyway, but thanks. When did we know that we were doing the right thing is a good question. I'm gonna tell you, for me personally, this is just to keep it kind of personal. When I knew is when I couldn't figure out how I was gonna be in the studio till 4 a.m. and be in a record store 10 this thing. So it was a big change. It says, okay, you know what? I need to let the day job go. And that's a pivotal point for any artist, because that's when you realize that, hey, I can't do both well. I either do one or the other. So it was a big, scary step. And at the time, that was the signal that you're ready to commit. You're not just a DJ. You're not just a one-hit wonder. At the time, we had Ultra, who was blowing up in Warner Brothers over in the UK. We had Crystal with Mercury. We had MCA with those guys. We had a whole bunch of stuff. We had 33rd Queen, sub-level. So it was a sign that, hey, I can do this full time. And I had to let that record store go slowly to part-time, slowly to I'm not here for a couple days, slowly to I'm overseas somewhere. So that was a pivotal point when all three of us knew. All three of us made a conscious decision. We actually sat at the table and said, okay, well, we need to think about this. We need to think about how we really going to do it. We came out of the basement. We invested in almost close to $500,000 studio. Almost close. it was a lot. We got out of the basement and built a track studio. And at the time, guys out there, the studio engineer, there was no digital. It was still MIDI and tape. So back then, you couldn't work from your computer at home. You had to work with tape and the big fat tape and things. So we had to invest. We did, and it was a 2-room studio. I mean, state of the art. But we were convinced that this is what we should do to do it. You know, you never want to do something and say, I wish I had a. And I don't have a wish I had a with Bass and Voice. Not one.